Welcome, welcome everyone to another week of the um, Regenerative Ag Network of Tasmania webinars, funded through the Australian Government Future Drought Fund and the TasFarm Innovation Hub. So, creating and monitoring functional landscapes. And also, we've been trying to blend in through that more on profit. And I've just got some questions up further, and whether we wanted to do like a practical example of how you were going on it. So rather than just talking about it, sort of do a practical uh, exercise next week on it. But yeah, I'll bowl through some stuff and then yell out at any stage. So I'm in Evandale in northern Tasmania, so I'd like to thank the Palawa people for looking after the land. And on the left is sort of where we farm with on the Gunai Kurnai people. So sent some cattle in last week to get processed. They're at the butcher dry aging at the moment. Um, so that'll be interesting. I don't feel like I've got the time or the energy, but I've just done it. So yeah, to older heifers, big heifers, and see how they go and how that goes as a meat business. So I'll keep you informed. Um, just the standard, the definition we use for regenerative agriculture. So money and people nested in this regenerating land, and we use scientifically valid and auditable measures of the land, the money, and the people. I'm trying to drag people into using something that we can measure rather than how you feel. As you may have picked up on, not so much of a how do you feel about things. I want to be able to measure it and see it change and see it happen and change on the ground. Um, we need low cost, low risk, resilient agriculture that's increasing biodiversity. I don't think that's all that hard. Um, yeah, I think that's what everyone sort of knows that's what we need. But typically, it's a bit like everyone what do they say? The man that's running away from the cliff seems to have lost his mind or whatever to those that are all running towards the cliff. I feel like the majority of agriculture is running towards the cliff. And when you try and run the other way, and talk about profit rather than production and all those sort of things. So now that Rob's on, I can say this. The dairy industry research is very clear that you need to be going for moderate producing dairy cows to be more profitable. But what is everyone doing? They're running towards the cliff looking for more milk, more production out of those cows. So I'll come
Excuse
back.
me.
Sure, Rob.
Would it be possible for you to send some data or information on that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, I will. Moderate producing cows. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that's great, Rob. Anyone has anything that I make a big claim about, I'm very, very happy to support it. So um, that so this is all supported. This is peer reviewed. I believe the world changed when David Tongway and Norm Hindley published this. It took me a while to catch on, 10 years or so. But to understand, how do you get water infiltration? How do you get nutrient cycling? Conventional ags would say for water infiltration, well, you've got to improve the structure, and they might be thinking about mechanical or tile drains or something, but it's actually the soil surface. I think we always knew that had to be covered to not erode, but nutrient cycling, I think, was the real dark one that came out of this, was that that basal cover of mature perennial grasses, decomposition of the litter, and the surface roughness. So a lot of the croppers knew about surface roughness. They'd plough it up so It wouldn't, so it'd infiltrate water over summer. A lot of the mallee, those sort of type areas, they did that. They'd plough it up and make it rough and coarse. But not many knew about litter and litter decomposition, or the impact of the perennial grasses being that great big funnel. So really good solid stuff. It works every time. You don't see it fail. Sometimes people don't increase the landscape function, but you never not see it, the environment get better if you do increase landscape function. I have seen some that were confusing, and you had to sort of do a bit of CSI on why they hadn't got better. And usually it was because they'd given it a light grazing, off shears, or people have done something. So they'd say, "Oh no, I only graze it once a year, Graham, and it should have increased in landscape function and all that sort of stuff." And then you go, "Oh yeah, but I do put them in there off shears." Do you know, like, so there's all these things just to give it a light graze. I don't graze it right down though. But you've got to work out what it is in your environment that increases landscape function, and these things of recovery, stock density, and utilization. I did sort of extreme sport. I asked Johan's group, is there anywhere that they've seen native herbivores, so large herds of herbivores, actually grazing it down to the dirt? Is there any evidence of that anywhere? Because they keep putting up photos on the uh, uh, they keep putting up photos of grazing it back to the bare dirt. So I've just asked for photos, and I sent it to my friend Peter up at in New South Wales, and I put that photo of the little mouse trying to get the cheese off, and it's called Extreme Sport, and he's got a crash helmet on. He's going to go in and try and get the cheese, which I always think is very fun. So, because I think they're taking off all the soil cover. They maintain their perennial grasses in those summer growing grasslands, but there's no litter and no litter decomposition. So I'd be interested to see that. Um, I think there's sort of some steps. I'm not sure I'm good at explaining this sort of stuff. You've got to work out, how do I actually move the animals around? So Stephen does things like drift the ewes that are lambing in that a 200-meter wide paddock, and he shifts the water and he shifts the feeder, and so that eventually all the ewes shift up to the fresh feed, and he can do that, and he gets an improvement. So I see what he's doing as sort of like a stepping stone to what we're talking about, to what Kirsten's doing, what I'm doing, what Celia's doing, and what others are doing. So Marshall, Shelley, Justin, etc. So it's like a gentle step in the right direction, combined with his individual animal ID. It's really kicking goals in that environment. Because he didn't say the frosts are so bad, so he used to keep the heavy ground down low, where it's all eroded down into those heavy old sort of look like lake beds to me, up there in that Mallee Wimmera area. And he used to keep them because they would maintain moisture and hold it and wouldn't dry out too early in the spring. But those areas are also where all the frosts sit. So if he didn't get beaten by being too dry, he got beaten by being too getting the frosts hit in those areas. So that's what we were talking about when he was changing. What can he do? And I think you might have picked up that he had on one of his slides. You can just hear me saying it. You need more sheep, less crop, but he actually acted on it. So it's that sort of acting, and I've got a question up further about that. How do you address people's individual barriers to adoption? So talking to Peter today about his cows, he's focusing on when we started talking, he was focusing on he's going to cull the bad cows. And I said, well, Johan says, don't worry about the cows, just get good bulls. If you're understocked, keep those crook cows and join them again or do something, but just get good bulls that are going to make them better, the next drop better cows. So I know if I sell breeders, that aren't very good, I feel good, but I'm not sure it's the right thing for the business. And Peter said, I've never heard you say that. That was today. And we talk a couple of times a week and stuff, so we talk about most things. So the secret is getting bulls that are going to produce the cows that you want. So they've got to be moderate milk producers, high um, weight to height ratios, all those other things. And I've got a slide on what I'm thinking of selecting for, and I'm happy for you to kick it around and tell me where I'm wrong. I think of the safe to fail trials as sort of just having a look, and I always like the idea of bumper bowling, so you don't end up in the gutter. But it's a hard thing to do, is not end up in the gutter. Excuse me. A lot of the advice for sheep farmers, when we were doing grazing management, resulted in the ewes getting pregnancy toxemia, because people they'll be moving around the farm and they'll have selected their lambing paddocks, and they find they're going too fast because they're overstocked, and they're going too fast, so they go, oh, and really pull them back tight and starve them into lambing, and then they get pregnancy toxemia. So, I think that people, for the ethical treatment of animals, wouldn't be worried about nipping a bit of skin off their bottoms if they see how much lamb abandonment and pregnancy toxemia and all that sort of stuff we get from mismanagement of grazing. So, and mismanagement of stocking rate, effectively. So, I don't know. That was nice and jolly, wasn't it? So that used to go well in front of the farmers. So they won't be worried about nipping a bit of skin off their bums. And I don't know whether I've told you, but like all the dairy farmers were inducing everything around me near Hayward, and I was running a day sort of thing on grazing, and I said, "Oh, you got to stop doing that," because they were getting collected for slink skins, sort of these preemie babies. I said, "It's just you cannot do that. You'll lose your social license," because it was pretty horrendous. And they go, "Oh, are you from the city or something?" I said, "Mate, I farm and I work at the abattoir, and I find it revolting. You need to get a grip." So it was really quite interesting. I tell them you'll put a flag up and you'll put them behind the yards, or you'll put them inside the gate or something. Don't hang them over the fence or over the yards or whatever. So, yeah. Where to set LFM verification? I've been talking about, I think there's a certain level of landscape function um, that puts you into the regenerating class. And at the moment, I think for a grazing business, this is the standard slide, except I've reduced it from greater than 20% to approximately 10. But I think if you've got these conditions of 100% ground cover, can't see the dirt, when you pull the leaves apart, there's litter between the perennial grasses, and you've got about 10% mature perennial grasses covering 10% of each hectare, and slight decomposition of the litter. So it only needs to be just breaking down. It's a very big band, the slight decomposition. So just starting to compost and go brown through to just before, which is quite deep litter, just before it gets fungal attack. So yeah, I think that's about where you can say, yes, I am regenerating. So is those conditions. So I think that's sort of, from what I've seen and measured and stuff, that's about right. Alan Savory said on one of his podcasts that he never sees over 10% perennial grass basal area. And I'm trying not to say I sent them Stephen Hobbs's webinar, and they wrote back interesting, just one word. I went, oh, so I told Peter, gee, that made me feel better. So I've been doing this drought work. I'm not picking up on the messages. It's usually, Lawrence, it's usually just the fungal hyphae. I'm not good on the way you name fungi, but visible fungal attack. So it's not the mushrooms and things like that. There's just fungal attack. So the where I see it is in really healthy bush, where you've got tree and bark and leaf litter. If you pull it back, you'll see the fungal hyphae. I think they call them hyphae, but I wouldn't bet anything on it. And you'll see that starting in there, and then it increases until you go from moderate decomposition to extensive decomposition, is the language of LFA. So yeah, so it's just visible fungal attack. When Celia and I were in Brazil, they were going, oh, they didn't like the attack word. They don't like safe to fail trials in the US because they don't like the word fail. They didn't like the attack, but colonization of the fungi and stuff. So
and they liked beneficial fungi rather than fungal attack, didn't they?
yeah, and I just go, oh well, that's what David Tomway said. I'm going to stick with that, but yeah, someone else can change that. So anyway, yeah, was that all right, Lance?
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So not the fruiting bodies. That was the term I was trying to find. So this is the rainfall at Wattle Park. So we're just west of Bairnsdale, near the airport. And this is what happened last year. So, it's average May, everything was tickety-boo, a bit dry January, Feb, but then, everything was pretty good. A bit drier in June. I knew that we needed to start selling. I was losing recovery. It's a really good early indicator that something's changed. Even though it was green and it seemed wet, I noticed that we were starting to lose that. So I've been saying I started bleating on the Tuesday night webinars that I needed to sell, but it didn't activate. So I'm trying to tell you that sort of I'd be doing these things, but make sure you activate, because we were in desperate trouble by September. I tried to sell in August some animals and the agent didn't want them. I should have just sold them anyway. Oh, well, I should have said a bit more like they would have, well, they're going to be at the yards. You may as well knock them down to someone, so. But then in October, not only did we have a lot of rain, we had a record. This is as long as history numbers have been kept. We had record rainfall for October. So it wasn't the most systematic. It wasn't the way I think we should manage. It was just a get out of jail free card. The other thing was, because it's so dominant in native grasses, they react differently than the winter growing introduced grasses like perennial ryegrass, Phalaris, cocksfoot, etc. They just grow and they're still their average poor palatability, but they're not. Then Microlina at the right stage will test similar to perennial ryegrass, but I know that I would have grown a lot of Phalaris and perennial ryegrass over in southwest Victoria, but it wouldn't have been very palatable. They wouldn't have put on weight. It looks green, it looks like you could eat it yourself, but it would have tested high in fiber, low in protein and energy. But because we had a native base, we got this record October, high November, high December, and then into the next year, high January. So then we've had feed and we've been living on it ever since. So we got a good rain in April, and that was, like I said to Jared, oh, we'll be right for a couple of months. But I assumed we'd get even half May, but it hasn't been. So, and at the moment, I think we're running, well, Jared rang and said since I've left, we've had 30 millimeters of rain. So we're going to be over half for June. So, yeah, so it's sort of pretty good. But we've never fed, never did anything, but that was the conditions, and we just lucked at this rain. And yeah, I need to get a grip and get onto it. So yeah, so I'm not saying it's easy. I had I was worried that Jared had bought these very expensive heifers and stuff like that. I found it harder to manage than if they'd been mine. I would have just wore it and got rid of them, but I felt like I was responsible for someone else's cattle, and it's really quite hard. So I'm not trying to stand up and say I know what's going on. I'm trying to say this is what I think we need to do. And if I'd done it when we were starting, because in June I presented the reports to the people, Justin and Shelley and Chris and stuff, that I wrote for them in June. And I told them to reduce their stocking rate. I did it for myself to reduce the stocking rate, and I didn't take any action. Then we ended up with the cows from New South Wales calving in August, not in September. It was all looking really, really poor, but managed to get out of jail. But yeah, I don't like living like that. This is Hamilton in Southwest Victoria. They had a record, well, not a record, they had a good rainfall in June, early cut-off spring. Then they had good November, good December, good January rain. But most people there have spent about 10 years, their debt's gone back to what it was 10 years ago. But like, I think this is what we're going to get more of. This sort of cut off late springs. If you get rain August, September, October in Southwest Victoria, the world's just beautiful. But if you don't, and at those really high extreme stocking rates, it all falls apart, even if you get rainfall later. And the advisors in that environment around Hamilton were some of the most critical of the Bureau of Meteorology. And I've been trying to get people to ask, what are they saying now? Because, the place has been grazed out. It's a desert. They're having really big drought field days and all of that. But when you look at this rainfall, that should be something that's very easily managed. And for you, Dominica and Charlie and stuff like that, sort of the range that you'd be very, very happy with, so. But because they're stocked at that 25 sheep per hectare or whatever, it all falls apart very, very quickly if you don't get the right rain at the right time. So it's just not resilient. Launceston, same sort of shape through there, same in that. So Shelley and Chris have still got grass, still got landscape function. They've gone around more than they want. We were talking about it yesterday. They know how to get it back. So, and then Scottsdale, same sort of thing. This is where Justin and Karen are at Toledo. And same sort of idea. He got caught with too many stock. So how was that? Was that all right? Does that sort of give you a feel of what's happened and how you need to build this resilience so that you can skip over 2 months? If you've got enough grass to skip over a couple of months of low rainfall, you'll get through most things. And I think if you've got enough long enough recovery to skip over that 4 to 5 months, then you've always got this resilience. And that's what Kirsten's been talking about, sort of with her horses and stuff like that. You've got enough feed and you've got enough resilience that any moisture that does fall. So down at Jericho, one of the drought sites that we've got. They got that late rain. I think it was like this sort of January period. And because he still had ground cover, he grew enough feed that he didn't have to feed the sheep as much as those that were at Bothwell and other places. So, yeah, so it's just that sort of thinking about how do I get this. The only way I know to reduce rainfall risk is to increase recovery length. I can't see any of the others. You'll run out of hay very quickly. You know, you can't keep enough hay and silage and stuff. It's very expensive. You've got to have long recoveries with high landscape function. And
So,
I'm trying to get, sorry.
Graham, I was just going to say the one thing that really surprised me, or, you know, you really appreciated going through this whole learning process, was how quickly or how much response a resilient pasture can give you with very, very little rain. It's like you don't need the months for the plant to rebuild itself. It's like you get a few millimeters and bang, it responds right away. And that still continues to kind of really amaze us. You know, you walk by and you go, wow, it's, you know, we only had a little bit, but it's all gone in and it's all doing something.
Yeah, I agree, Kirsten, because at Hamilton, if they didn't get 20, 25 mils in a rain, they never started growing anything because the animals were stocked at such a rate that they would eat it faster than it was coming away anyway. And we'd get 5 mils and we'd be up and have green grass. The neighbour used to always come in and say each year, oh, you've already got cattle feed. And I thought, I'm just going to see how long he kept doing it. He just kept doing it until we left, you know. You've already got cattle feed because we'd have green grass like that. So they ran sheep and cattle and they needed to wait for the break. They had all those, you know, it doesn't run to the dams until after the 8 inches after the break. They had lots of really good things. I loved listening to them talk and stuff, but they couldn't understand, well, how come you've already got cattle feed? Had a really good talk, and I don't know how the group's going on this, but Neil and Penny on the Tuesday night webinar, they just got cows. They've only been trading beforehand, and they haven't had a lot of experience with AI and joining them. And yeah, so we just went through this, and I think it went really well. They were happy at the end of the day that they could ask anything, and they don't. You know, hopefully I can keep that sort of thing that, you know, it doesn't worry me what people ask. You know, yeah. So they were saying, do they need a bull? You know, like, or should you go AI? And and I just say, well, you know, the majority of people, if they use AI, have a clean up bull. You know, you can't sort of, otherwise you've got to keep AI. And there's dairy farmers around us in East Gippsland that just keep AI. And I go, oh, wow. Yeah, like, so, yeah, so with this, 36 Angus cows, what would they do? You know, is there an issue with biosecurity? You know, if you AI, are you preg testing before putting the bull out? I hadn't even thought of that. But like, so I just said, well, we AI and throw the bulls out a week later. You know, but really, you know, the bulls seem to know who's pregnant and who's not. You know, but you know, they just don't cycle. So so all that sort of stuff, if you don't know it, it's all a bit murky and things. But if anyone has any questions and things like that, and I said, I wouldn't give that cow, I wouldn't use AI on that cow that if she hasn't got pregnant in 8 weeks with a bull, I wouldn't do that. I'd just let her get in calf to the mop up bull. I don't worry too much about biosecurity. I probably need to worry about it more. There is a cost, but that's sort of when you've got cows. I'd wait and do the normal pregnancy testing, either manual or whatever, ultrasound, whatever the AI technician recommends, 14 weeks, all that sort of stuff. So, and then we got into talking about it. They got necessarily want to do a meat business. So I said I'd just stick with the best grass-fed Angus bulls you could get, because they'll probably sell better. Angus in South Gippsland, where they are, is just the flavour of the month. I wouldn't be mucking around with Mashona and worrying that some of them are going to have horns and all that sort of stuff. I'd just be doing that. So yeah, so if you do, make sure you jump in if there's any questions. It doesn't worry me. And then he was talking about these New Zealand Black Angus that have been, doing line breeding and grass fed and all that sort of stuff. So, excuse me. Yeah, this is what he's thinking of doing. I said, sounds great. If you can be bothered with AI, but Neil and Penny, like Neil's a retired pediatric surgeon, so he knows probably a lot about this stuff, more than I'll ever know. And he then sent him. This is the process that we used for the AI last year. So, and I find that you've just got to go with the AI technician a fair bit. But he was saying, because I was away and all that sort of stuff, he was trying to get me to do this as late as possible, take them out on the Tuesday, because he knew I wasn't going to be there, and he then had to go and do the dairy cows first, a big mob of dairy cows, so he wouldn't be back till 1. So it was really fitting in with my work and his work, and how are we going to do it? And I said, that's what you want. You want to be able to work with those people. So, but yeah, just get an AI technician and work with them. Any comments on that? Any thoughts?
Just about giving cattle injections. You put them in the head bale, or can you just sneak up on them?
Well, they tend to put them in the head bale. So you're putting that cedar in, which is like a bit of an umbrella-y thing that goes in sort of into the vagina, and you've got to sort of get them standing quietly. Some people can do all those things. He was working. His wife came to a couple of these, and the pair of them, gee, they could go. Like when the pair of them were going, I couldn't keep up. Sort of getting the cows up to them. So yeah, so they were injecting in the race, a lot of them into the rump, but then sort of like to inseminate. So they'd already, think they'd already been injected by the time they were inseminated, but tended to put them in the head bale to get the cedars in if they wouldn't stand quiet. Some of them were pretty wild. They're not dairy cows, but they do have their own beef cows, so they're pretty good. So, so your questions, Rob. I think I may have confused the issue a bit about this, and I was trying to work out sort of I'm assuming that on the dairy farm you probably won't be at 12 months recovery. I'm thinking it's going to be somewhere between 6 and 9 months. And most of the time in the growing season, and and how you sort of talk about that sort of with in terms of irrigation and stuff, there won't be that big canopy of dry feed over the top. It'll be mainly green grass with the sorry.
Yeah, just with that, Graham. I'm not really talking about my situation here. I'm just really curious about your particular system.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about like probably beef cattle with a really long recovery, like what you do, and 7 shifts a day at really high densities, which I can't really do here. Not at the moment, anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I put this in, so I'll go to this and then go back. But there's some of the words, I took this off the internet sort of thing. Some of the words on feeding are really interesting. But most people when they're feeding these cows, they're substituting. So, you know, if they give them more feed, it reduces the pasture intake. So they're usually giving them, a lot of the time, they're giving them higher quality feed than what they are, and they're getting this whole substitution. Whereas I'm talking about more this supplementation, complementation, or using small amounts of high protein as a catalyst to make sure the rumen's functioning properly. So in trying to keep well away from the substitution level of feeding, just a small amount of that high protein sort of, which I think, so if I just say that, so I'm talking about supplementation, not substitution, or just, I couldn't think of a better word than catalyzing the rumen or whatever. So what I'm saying is that if you've got a great big bulk of dry leaf stalk and material, really high levels of biomass, and a little bit of green in the bottom, that little bit of green grass in the bottom's enough to supplement the rumen to make it work and process more of that feed. So supplementation, not substitution. So they're not substituting. So what the others are doing is, like Johan Zeitsman and Jim Elizondo, they're going really fast around a certain part of the farm, overgrazing it, and then they grow their stockpile. Then they put them on in the non-growing season into the stockpile and either give them urea, which would be what Johan would do, or loosen pellets or whatever, which would be what Jim Elizondo would do. And they're trying to only give them enough to catalyze the rumen so that they can eat that big bulk of feed. So I got a bit lost in the numbers and stuff, but yeah, it would be, it would be more like, if it's a 600 kilo cow, they would, and they're going to eat on 3% of their body weight in dry matter. It'd be more like a kilo of green or enough urea to do that sort of stuff. So there'd only be a tiny little piece of that. So yeah, but that's, having said that, so they're actually supplementing the rumen, whereas I'm trying to give them enough of that green understory. So they give them enough bulk. They tend to have a lot of bulk. The summer grasses grow a lot of bulk of low palatability, so high fiber, low protein energy. So it's this sort of thinking. So when you see what they're talking about, you've got to remember, with his 4 times per day and having the weekends off and all that sort of stuff, he's managing that by giving them that lucerne pellets or lucerne hay, or soya meal, as you've said, and all those sort of things, just to keep that the rumen functioning so they can process that dry feed. So what we found, if we're not supplementing them, we had to work the weekends as well, otherwise their rumens would shift. They can get their rumens back by the supplementing. So they're doing a different type of thing. Johan's more likely to use 7 moves a day, just at that sort of high stock densities. When it's dry, they tend to go to 3,000 cows per hectare as well. They sort of triple that stocking rate to get the feed on the ground, and to get the animal performance with dry feed, you've got to work harder, is the way I keep it in my head. So when it's green, you can come back below 1,000 and they'll still go okay and utilize it well and get good performance. When it's dry, when it's tough, that's when you do it. The way they don't necessarily keep a green understory, and I believe that to keep a green understory, from the growing season. You can't go through it and chop it out all the time. And it takes a year or two before you develop that green understory. So, so I'm saying the lowest cost, lowest risk thing to do is to go slowly around, keep a green understory so that when it dries off, you can do that. When it's green, it's hard to get it wrong if if you know what you're doing. But when it's dry, that's when it's really hard work. So it's that sort of thinking. So did I do that all right? Did I put too much stuff in that?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Graham. So by shifting them 7 times a day as opposed to 4, can you get more protein into them?
Definitely. Yeah.
So that's the idea, right?
Yeah. So my long recoveries, more frequent moves, keeps that rumen ticking over. So that combined with so you've got the long recoveries to build your landscape function, and then you've got the frequent moves to get the animal performance and the stock density. When I started off with grazing management and working with Alan Savory, and I made contact with Terry McCosker. This is early 90s and all that sort of stuff. It sounded like everything was great. Like you could just do all these things and stuff, and I just didn't find that to be true. And there was a few key moments, like Patrick Francis and I swapping photos. I was trying the free choice minerals, and the grass was always better under the trolley where it got twice as long a recovery. So there was all these things, and the animal performance, I just couldn't match what they were saying they were doing. Doubling the stocking rate and everything was great. It just didn't work. So it took me forever to work out that, they're talking about areas that don't use inputs that are probably a bit understocked, the low rainfall zones, Western New South Wales, rather than the inside country, which we're already resowing and feeding. So the stocking rates couldn't be doubled in on the high rainfall zone, but they could in the low rainfall zone. So there's all that stuff interacting. And it took forever to work it out. Summer grasses versus winter grasses. So most of the grazing trainers are all summer grass people. And it's very hard, like Jim and Jaime and, Jim and Johan and Alan and Terry McCosker, all of them come from C4 grasslands, and a lot of them, subtropical to tropical. So it's a different world than what in the temperates down here and stuff. So because of, sorry?
Graham, when you were talking about supplementing their feed, what sort of supplements are you talking about there?
Well, we tend not to, but Jim Elizondo, he uses like a lucerne hay pellet thing that he uses for them. Whereas the majority on Johan Zeitsman's group are using like the McCosker brew. Have you heard of that? It's like a urea with a.
And does that affect their gut though? Does that affect their?
Well, it's sort of. It's killed a lot of animals. So
yeah. And you would think the extra cost. I mean, you've got to work it all out, but it's just another cost, isn't it?
See, all these people, Dominica, they want to double or triple or quadruple the stocking rate. That's their driver. It's not about landscape function or improving the environment, and not easy to do, because if you increase intensity, you increase your rainfall risk many times over. So it turns into a bit of a disaster. But the majority of people the majority of trainers all try and increase people's stocking rate. And I'm saying there's a flip from, Western New South Wales to, high rainfall zone, Cootamundra or something. They're different. They behave different. out at Cobar, there was only a grass plant every kilometre. So you put a grass plant every 500 metres, you can double your stocking rate. So I've driven over some of those big places out there for most of the day and haven't seen a perennial grass. So and the only place that there was where they opened the gates for the goat trap, and it was a double hinged gate, and it made like a little tiny triangle, and that had perennial grass, and it had deep litter and landscape function. So it was about that size, the triangle I could make with my arms. And I reckon we'd driven around for 8 hours looking for a perennial grass. So, and not slow either. Yeah, like it was just amazing. So, yeah. So, yeah, they use some sort of. So the idea is that you've somehow got to get some sort of protein supplement into the rumen so that it catalyzes it so that they can perform on that dry grass. And it can be anything that's sort of a high protein, like a lucerne hay, a soy meal, urea-based lick or something like that. So, yeah.
On a test case of one, our skinny grey cow is doing really well with just like a tiny bit of lucerne cubes. She's
Yeah,
got the
fantastic.
best gut fill out of the herd now.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it? So, it's like a real life example. I love it. I love it when it works. It's a bit like sort of driving Stephen Hobbs. If it hadn't worked, I would have disappeared. So, I'm sorry, Graham can't make the webinars anymore.
So now I need to know, should we be supplementing the rest of them?
Well,
I don't
yeah,
want to.
possibly. And what you want to? I'm saying get rid of grey cow. Yeah, I think I've made that very clear. Yeah, like you've got to have the future is in getting bulls that allow you to produce cows that love and thrive on this management. And that's sort of what we've got to get to. But I think it's one of the biggest barriers. Once you learn how to do it, get the fencing, get the water, then it's the animals. And I think we need sort of a concerted effort on doing that. So with the bracken lights, I don't let them nibble too much. I watch them. It's okay if they're just sort of taking the tips off things. If they start substituting their diet onto bracken, that's when it becomes a problem. So if it runs out of grass and they start eating the bracken as feed, you've got to get them out of there. So,
okay. Good to know. Thank
I'd
you.
be looking at the grass level. We've got areas like on Wattle Park that are nearly all bracken. And I move the caravan down to graze them, because I want to watch them during the day and move them along and then take them off that and give them grass and just try. Most of the time in those real high density areas that are grazed out, real high bracken fern and that grazed out by kangaroos, I'm almost just walking them through, so trying to trample and germinate some grasses. So yeah, but you can get out of it, but you've got to trample it. One of the things that when I first started farming with cows, we used to roll out bales of hay on the bracken fern. You could shift it back to grass that way because they had something to eat and you could trample it. So it's impacting. It's usually quite sandy and quite fluffy. And wherever you drive the ute or the buggy or you walk a track through or whatever, that'll be perennial grass and not bracken fern. So it's too fluffy to get germination of your perennial grasses. How's that going? 5 minutes.
Yeah, just
Sure.
just one more thing. So
Yeah.
just make sure I've clarify this to make sure I've got it right. So with longer recoveries, you'll end up with more protein because of that understory of green grass. Is that right?
Yes, if so when you get you're going through spring in our environments, Rob, you'll get canopy closure because you're not coming back and breaking the canopy open all the time. And then you've got moisture sort of cycling under here in a real sort of micro cycle. And that's how you get that green understory. But you've got to work at it to make, you've got to have high landscape function and the conditions for things to germinate, hold moisture. You need lots of litter decomposition, because that is what keeps all that moisture in under there to give you that green understory. So we could keep green understory right through into the sort of middle of Feb, even, it effectively dried out, in, maybe the start of December, halfway through November. But these conditions allowed it to go through, because what I'd been taught was to do quite a few laps over the non-growing or the slow-growing period over summer. And I found that if I slowed down, I created those conditions. So you're creating the conditions to hold that green feed longer through, and that's what they use for their protein. And then, but if you give them a big area, they run around and eat it all, and then there's only dry feed left. So you're sort of rationing out the green feed as you go down your strip. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Graham.
Okay. So I sometimes wonder whether
No,
I'm going to
that,
skip through.
I was just going to say that what you said works then, Graham, because that's what I found with the horses. I had to really pressure them when I had that whole canopy closure to force them to eat both the tasty green and the dry material. Whereas if you gave them too much space, they just went around and picked all the green stuff.
Yeah, and then sit there and sulk. Their hind guts, the bugs had shifted in their guts, and that was it.
Yeah.
So I've skipped through a few things. This is what I'm thinking of to start recording. I've been very inspired by, and I've seen that talk 3 or 4 times, but for some reason, I'm going to activate this time. And what am I going to collect? And one of the things that I know is that this kilogram per centimetre hip height ratio, that you want that to be higher. And if you go for that, the bulls more early maturing and the heifers are more early maturing, or the rams or the ewes are more early maturing. I do this thing of giving them a condition score at calving and at joining. I don't know whether I need weaning, I'm not sure yet. But if most people try and get the cows very fat before they calve, and then once they start milking, they lose weight into joining. What we always did was we calved at the start of the growing season, so March, April, and I wanted them to put on fat or another body condition score by the time they got to joining. Everyone, you could imagine how that went in the environment that I lived in. So this is like an intensive, I was going to say blue blood, but I didn't want to. But like a real intensive, bloody, angry sort of environment that everyone knew what they were talking about. And they would say to me, that's impossible. You cannot have cows putting on weight when they're milking. And I go, well, we do, and we select for it. So you want that high fertility. Inherent fertility comes from body condition. So it's that sort of stuff that we need to do. So I'm saying, the phenotype, I'm still thinking about all these things. I want them to only keep the heifers and any potential bulls out of that first 21 days, the first calving cycle, and to start recording these and see how we go. There's good data that as you increase that weight to height ratio, that you actually increase puberty in heifers, lambs, dairy cows, all that as well, not just beef. beef heifers. So there's a really good link to with bulls as well that Johan's done. Just before I go, sorry, is it worth doing the planning a profit thing a bit more? Is everyone comfortable with where we are on that? I was going to try and do a practical exercise of filling out, well, if you've got this many animals and they're making this much money, what does that mean? And you put a bit of a tighten your belt on making sure you keep enough profit and things like that. Would a practical exercise like that help on the financials? Yep. I'll have a go at doing that next week. I'll sort of make sure that I've had a few practice runs. I'll practice on the Tuesday night crew, so that I'm a bit better by Wednesday night. So that's been okay.
Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, oh, good. I hope it has been.
Can I just give a prompt about the conference? We really need some ticket sales. We have to decide in the next week or so whether it goes ahead or whether we switch it to a virtual or what we do, because it's we don't have enough ticket sales at the moment. So we've got an early bird price to the 14th of June, and then we have to make some hard decisions. So we're not the only, there's another conference up there that's actually been pulled back to a one-day conference down south because they couldn't get numbers. Yeah, it's a perennial problem at the moment. So if you could share the daylights out of the conference in your networks, it'd be great. Yeah, so perhaps I'll send the flyer through to Graham and he could send out with his slides. Oh no, I do that. I'll send it out. I'm getting Wednesday and Tuesday mixed up. That'd be great.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, everyone.
Celia, just questioning the posts on the Rant Facebook page.
Yeah.
Have you made them fully public so that if I share that in various groups and stuff?
Yes, it's a public group. So
cool. Excellent.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks, Kirsten.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Graham.
Thank you.
See
you
you
next
all.
week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.